Hello, welcome. My name is Alicja Sadownik and I'm a senior researcher at the KINDknow Knowledge Center at the Western Norway University of Applied Sciences. I have had honor of being a co-editor of the book Young Children and Their Rights in the World, together with Adrijana Višnjić-Jevtić and Ingrid Engdahl, who will present a lecture discussing the main point of the books. The lecture was presented as a guest lecture at KINDknow Knowledge Center at Western Norway University of Applied Sciences on Friday, the 17th of September 2021, and now it is going to be recorded. So Adriana and Ingrid, the floor is yours or the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Alicja.
Thank you, Alicja.
And together with Ingrid Engdahl, we will talk a bit about what children's rights is a way to address sustainability in the period of Anthropocene. My name is Adrijana Višnjić-Jevtić and I'm assistant professor at University of Zagreb at Faculty of Teacher Education. I'm a long time member of OMEP, which I would like to acknowledge in this book mostly. Because most of our networking was done through OMEP, and OMEP is an association who is actually trying to enhance respect for children's rights all over the world. So Ingrid, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, well, I'm Ingrid Engdahl. I'm a preschool teacher and a researcher in young children in preschool. My main topics are toddlers, play, children's rights, and also sustainability. And through sustainability, I got to know you, Adriana, and we work with sustainability projects in OMEP too. I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden, and I'm now a senior researcher, so I'm all for this kind of work.
Okay. I think that we should start with the lecture now. So many of you may be questioning yourself why we even discuss about children's rights after 31 years that UNCRC is here with us. Based on some research, we should highlight that United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child is still not enough known. Not by all children, not by all professionals who are working with the children, not by all parents, and so consequently not in society at large. And one thing that should be added to this unknowing part is that there is not known absolutely in detail. So maybe there are professionals, parents and children who are aware that there is something called a Convention on the Rights of the Child, but still they don't know what actually does it mean, or they don't know maybe the ways how can contribute to the respecting children's rights. So that was basically the reason why we started discussing about that book and try to combine all continents and many countries. There is 14 countries presented in the book, so we can actually map how does it respecting children's rights are in the moment and what we should do as professionals and researchers. So UNCRC is a holistic document with 4 principles. We all are aware there is a non-discrimination principle, the principle of the best interest of child, and this is the one of the principles that Ingrid will later introduce more in detail. Then, of course, we know that children has a right to survive, to develop, to life, and the one of the principles that are not so much known or not so much respected is a right to express. The children's right to express views in all matters that affect the child. this principle should be especially acknowledged by the professionals in early childhood education and care, because in this youngest period of life, children should be encouraged to really express their views, and to adults understand and hear them and their voices, not just to listen, but actually try to deal with that and try to put the view of the child in front of maybe perspective of adults. And here is, of course, the right to know about your rights, because if children don't know about their rights, they cannot work, or they cannot strive toward respecting the children's rights. And the UNCRC start from the image of a childhood. So the child and the childhood in the Convention on the Rights of the Child is seen as not just transporting children towards adulthood, but as a period of time where childhood and being a child has their own intrinsic values. So children are seen at the same time as the right partakers and as someone who is in the need of protection. Of course, that may be reflected in the perspective of adults and child through these partakers and in need of protection, because adult is those who should protect the children as well. And the rights in the United Convention are mentioned as universal. So every child has rights. There is no child should be left behind in the disrespecting of child's story. But on the other hand, adults should be very much aware that each childhood is happening in different contexts. So the children's rights are universal, but still we have to take account the context where each child is living, and what is especially for the culture or the family or the education where the child is growing up. And Ingrid?
Yes, one of the most well-known articles is Article 3, and it is about in decision making, we should always look for the best interests of the child. And we ask ourselves, whose perspective are we talking about? And in the book, this is something that many authors write about. If you look at, for instance, the adult's perspective, it's clear that the convention is asking adults, the state parties has taken on the task to provide, promote, and protect the lives of young children. And some countries have made the UN Convention international law. Other countries have incorporated the principles of the articles in the convention into existing laws. And I would say the adult perspective is the most well-known. But if we listen to holistically to the convention, we also need to take care of the children's perspective. And it is both each and every child. The convention is called the rights of the child. So each and every child has these rights. And then groups of children, they can promote and put forward certain aspects, certain things they want to do. And even that two groups of children could stand like with different interpretations of what's in the best interests. And in this part, by recognizing this, and by recognizing that children's voices are often shown in actions, in activities, what they prefer to do, what they do, you can sort of give the children's perspective a stronger position in implementing the UN Convention. And in this picture, we would like to say right now, it is the adult's perspective that is dominating, but we should get a balance and be more open for each child and for children's voices. Next, please. And to illustrate, maybe just have seen this kind of pictures before, but the convention is about rights for a just and equal life. And it's important to say that equality and equity is not the same. It's not enough to give the same possibilities. It should also be with equity. So this picture illustrates that you need to put it into context and look at each and every child. The 15 chapters of the book represent all regions of the world. And editors, Alicia, Adriana, and me, we have written the introduction of the book, and we've also written the conclusion of the book. And in the conclusion, we have used this model. It's a model developed by Julie Davis from University of Queensland, Brisbane, Australia in 2014. And this model shows that at the core, the white center, you have the UNCRC and its rights. But Julie Davis challenges us that within early childhood education, we should go broader. There are more dimensions of rights that could be inspirational and good for us when we work in early childhood education. So with this model, we use this model and these 5 dimensions to analyze the 15 chapters and see what are they talking about, what is predominant and what is left out. So we will go through these chapters in this way.
The first dimension, as Ingrid already told, is about the foundational children's rights. So almost all chapters are dealing with this first dimension, not as a focus on the first dimension, but in all chapters you may find different authors discussing the foundational children's rights. From the right to survival, the right to protection, the right to development, we also have a part of the book there that is dealing with educational perspective, which is education as a right to development is foundational children's rights. So some of the chapters are oriented toward the task that states should fulfill to implement this foundational children's right and to respect them. For example, that's you may find in the chapter from North Macedonia. And some of the examples that you may find in the chapters are about discussing that children are not mini human beings with mini human rights, that they are actually human beings with human rights, and that we as adults should be adapted, not them to us, but we to them. And the children are citizens. As citizens, they have a right to participate, is, as we already said, any important things that is dealing to children. We also discuss about the right to education as a prerequisite for all other rights. But in the book, you will find many information that unfortunately early childhood education and care are still not neither accessible, neither acceptable, neither adaptable for all children. So the conditions where children live are very much different across the world. So if the right to education is prerequisite for all other rights, it is questionable whether the all children actually has the access to the right to education. And Anne Forel is discussing about child-friendly environment in Australia in early childhood education and care settings. So it is not just enough to have access to early childhood education and care. It is also important how this environment is arranged for children. Is it a child-friendly? Is give child opportunity? Or is it set by the perspective of adults? And we also, through the foundational rights, discuss child consequences to analyze their thoughts before we as adults make decisions. So in few chapters you may find discussion on, for example, some laws that are influencing children's lives, but still no one asks children about how they feel on some changes that their laws or documents or legislation is to influence them. And we are very much aware that conditions are not equivalent. some countries appointed UNCRC as a national law, for example, Norway and Sweden. And the chapter from Norway is actually giving more light on this perspective of UNCRC. While from the other hand, UNCRC is not incorporated in national laws or not even ratified. For example, the United States of America and the chapter from United States are also discussing perspective of children's rights in a country where the UNCRC is not supported by the law. And in conclusion, we actually discuss about it. If children live in different conditions, and we are all aware that they are living in different conditions, and this living condition be prerequisite for respecting human rights? Does it mean that children who live in poverty, or the migrant children, or indigenous children, or children with special needs are having not so much access, or should they have the same access, or should we support them on the other way, that children who are not living in that conditions? So we conclude that even children are living in different conditions, that access to UNCRC, to respecting their rights, should be the same regarding on their, for example, parental status, because it is very different how children and family can respect children's rights in the families who are not educated, who are immigration, who are with a lack of housing, some health issues, and something similar to them, and how we can reach to the children who has no access to early childhood education and care. So we conclude that living conditions shouldn't be the prerequisite, because regarding on the living condition, all children should have the same respect for human rights. Ingrid?
Thank you. Okay, if we then move on to the second dimension in Julie Davis' model, it's about agentic participation rights. And this dimension is leaning on something that is developed in Article 12, also 13 and 14, about the right for children to express their own views in all matters that affect the child. This dimension is challenging us to listen to the child. It's not just enough for asking children for their opinions. We should also listen to these opinions and discuss with children and enact their ideas when possible, in education, in family, in society, in research. We also want to look at this dimension as a way to organize for child participation in the broader society. So not just talking about how we handle children's ideas within our own settings, but how could the setting, in collaboration with the children, reach out to participate in society? The UNCRC has 54 articles, I think 24 general comments that are developing the articles, and also 3 optional protocols, where the committee in Geneva and the UN have developed parts that was not really finished in the original version in 1989. And right now we have the optional protocol 3 out for signing. It is ratified. Enough countries have ratified it, so it's guilty. It should be followed around the world. And it is about children's participation rights to tell about their rights, to tell about their lives, and to complain. If they recognize rights from the who are described in the convention, and these rights are not followed, you can't live these rights in your country. You have the right, following optional protocol 3, to complain. And you should first of all complain in your society, in your country, but the country also needs to answer for the committee in Geneva. And there should be a communication procedure where the country takes the children's complaints seriously. And if that's not done, it goes to the committee in Geneva to give their comments and their concluding remarks about children's rights. So this is the agentic part. Following dimension number two, we have the third dimension, and it is about collective rights. Maybe you noticed that the name of the convention is the rights of the child as a separate individual, but we are all individuals and together we live together. And this dimension is about how individuals should live together and how the rights could be implemented for everyone. So of course, here we have Article 2 about no discrimination. The rights I have are also the rights for you. And it's not in the equal way. We also need to recognize that there are differences. Contextualized, like you talked about, Adrijana, there are differences between people and ideas that are okay. There should be differences, but we should be able to handle these by living together. And one collective right of children is the right to play. And there is something, there is a comment, I think it's, I don't remember if it's general comment number 17, I think, that is about the right to play, and that the right to play is challenged in many societies, and the children don't play enough. So one collective right to support and implement and really strive towards is children's right to play. Another example of collective rights is given by Julie Davis when she talks about all the knowledge that we have in indigenous people and in traditional knowledge. And we can see there are many reports in the chapters that indigenous children are a special group of children who are not having their rights fulfilled. Traditional knowledge is important to bring up to show that societies throughout centuries have been able to live in a democratic way also. And we also know that children, when presented with problems, quite often come up with an idea of doing something good together, doing the common good, which leans on a respectfulness, to respect each other, doing something good together in a non-discriminatory approach. This is what we try to address in the third dimension. Moving on, the fourth dimension is about intergenerational rights. And here we chose to quote one of the most common definitions of sustainable development, the one that comes from the Brundtland report in 1987. Brundtland writes, sustainable development is a development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And in this dimension with intergenerational rights, we can look to the past and see what could be learned and what must be changed. We can look at the present and the future. In the book, we have some articles, some chapters talking about old hierarchies in the past that don't really accept such a concept as children's rights. I think, for instance, in the Chinese chapter, Confucianism and the status of the father is put on a high level to such extent that it's not even possible for children to oppose their fathers. And this is not possible to, that kind of ruling strategy, that hierarchy is not possible to intertwine with UNCRC. If we look at present time, we have examples from the US and Sweden where parents don't recognize children as citizens. They think they have the supremacy over their children. In the US, for instance, parents don't allow children to have a say in everything. They have the one right, and it's to obey the parents. In Sweden, for instance, when social services would like to talk with children, maybe in a case of child abuse or some accident that's happened, parents still have the right to say, no, if you want to talk with my child, I will be present, or we don't allow you to talk with our children. And this means that children's views will not be put forward in the investigation. So the future in this dimension of intergenerational rights would be to work in a way that we equalize power between children and adults. And in certain fields, I would say child power is stronger than adults' power. And I'm thinking of such fields as digital technology, phones, computers, where I'm not sure if the average age is 10, or when do the children in a family become the experts on all these things and have more power actually than their parents around digital devices. And maybe that's just one example showing, but it shows that children have knowledge and views and ideas that are important, and we need to bring these into our society and the development of our society by equalizing power, listening to children. Yes, next please. Coming to the last and fifth dimension, it is about the planet Earth, about biocentric rights and ecocentric rights. And there are no strict borders between these 5 dimensions. So the foundational rights from the UNCRC, that is at the core, the first dimension, from there on to the 5th dimension, you can move between the dimensions. And some examples and some happenings illustrate 2 or 3 dimensions. And but it's to be really to really take on the challenge from Julie Davis' model, you should try to reach towards the 5th dimension and to think about the rights of the planet, the rights of the non-living, the rights of society, humankind, and the whole future. And we could say, although we started out collecting articles and authors around the UNCRC 30 years later, we also see that in this book, the Convention on the Rights of the Child is linked to the Sustainable Development Goals that were appointed by the UN General Assembly in 2015. And working for the CRC, for the children's rights, go hand in hand with working for a sustainable future. And we can see these in some chapters, but we will say most chapters don't talk about this 5th dimension. We would say in some of them, but not all. Some examples that are mentioned are linked to the organization OMEP that you introduced, Adriana, the World Organization for Early Childhood Education. And this OMEP organization has run a project for sustainability since 2009, and with the goal to reorient and transform early childhood education towards sustainability. OMEP was also present and active in writing the convention in the 1980s, and now we work also for sustainability. And the one thing or 2 things that are goals for these world projects is listening to children's voices, bringing forward their ideas, making them known in the larger adult world and society, but also to raise awareness among teachers, among adults, all who are interested in a sustainable future, to raise awareness about sustainability, about children's rights. And there's one organization who go from dimension 1 all through to dimension 5 constantly back and forth. And it's the youth movement, Fridays for Future. And I would be very proud if we could say that early childhood educators also have the competence, are aware enough to go from dimension 1 through 2, 3, 4, and 5 back and forth for children's rights and for sustainable future. To do this, we also need knowledge about the future and sustainability and what is climate change and what is global warming and so on. And in the concluding part of the book, we introduce these concepts, planet boundaries and do not economy. And please read about this and think about what you are saying, what you are thinking. Planet boundaries, it's a concept developed from Stockholm University, and it is about natural science way of describing why planet Earth is on the wrong direction, why it's unbalanced, and why we can't go on living the way we do. And you can see these 9 planet boundaries on the outside of this image, and you maybe recognize them. It is about climate change, it's about ocean acidification, it's about ozone layers, air pollution, and so on. And when these boundaries are tipped, the scientists say there's no way back. Once we've tipped, once the acidity of the ocean is too high, we can't go back. We don't know how to restore a living sea again. And the red color symbolizes the four areas where the boundaries are already tipped. In the inner circle, in the green circle, you see more of social goals, where the planet boundaries come from natural science. We also have social science and humanity. And here we talk about water, food, health, education, peace and justice, gender equality, and so on. And in the inner circle, the red fields show where we are not doing well. It should be just white in the inner circle, and we should have a thick green donut to get a healthy planet. And this is a bit tricky, but it's important that we know what we are talking about and what fields we should really be active within, because the red in this picture show where we are going really the wrong way. So we call this, we talk about this, presentation, which included the concept of the Anthropocene, which means the time of mankind, human beings. This is the time when the development of and on the planet Earth is driven by human beings' lifestyles. And we know that the lifestyle we have collectively is not good. We are overusing and changing important aspects of planet Earth's, let's say, conditions for living. And there's another thing possible, and we talk about it or write about it in the concluding chapter, and also some of the other chapter authors touch on this, that we should change. In the Anthropocene, we should recognize that human beings' lifestyle is not acceptable, and we need to change towards an ethical approach where we have a genuine respect for nature and non-living systems, and not just putting the human being as the capital or the center of the life. This needs to be interwoven, and that's why we talk about ecosystems and biocentric systems in balance on Earth. So in the Anthropocene, with the 5 dimensions of Julie Davis, we can find a way towards a sustainable early childhood education with children's rights. We want a healthy planet. We need a new ethical stance where the rights of nature and all living species are included. We would like to have an empowered child because they influence locally and globally, and they promote changes. Humans cannot manage without clean water, clean air, or food. And one good thing, when we wrote this book, the COVID-19 pandemic captured the world or went through the world. And we include this part in the concluding chapter. And we could conclude that one good thing with the pandemic, and also linked to the climate crisis, is that when we have a crisis, we could make hard decisions. There are possibilities for behavior change, and suddenly most governments found money and resources to promote changes to stop the pandemic. And we would like that kind of action to happen also for children's rights and to stop climate crisis. But time is running scarce. We have the International Panel on Climate Change that just the other month, 2021, said that the development that is described by the concepts of planet boundaries, for instance, is so quick now, so time is running scarce, and all the goals that have been put up by UN leaders and national leaders, we need to make an effort to reach them more quickly. We can't wait, time is running scarce. Adriana, this is what we agreed on to bring up today. Would you like to finish the lecture, the presentation?
Thank you very much. And I would just like to thank to all our co-authors and to all those who contribute that the book is out, is published. It was a very nice experience, and I think that all of us, we all learn a lot. So thank you very much, and we are looking to hear your opinion on the book. So you may write to some of us, and thank Alicia who hosted us.
Yes.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and this presentation will be distributed through the communication channels of both OMEP and Kindergarten Knowledge Center at the Western Norway University of Applied Sciences, and it will be followed by the link with video where each of the authors is shortly presenting each chapter. So please watch these two videos together, because then you will get a holistic picture of the book and its content.